I'm feeling rich, and I'm finally about to cash out. Smothered and covered like I'm some hash browns. Glass clown, stash crowns till I pass out. Bass, trout, lobster on my plate, milking the cash cow. Stacks tall as shack, protect your neck and watch your back. I'm counting checks and cracking packs, collecting decks and pumping gas. What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like it in Magic, and today we're going to look at the most doctored deck of the season. I have helped no less than 3 patrons with this list so far, so I guess if you can just logically extrapolate that out, you can take that to mean that a lot of people are excited about Revel and Riches right now. But that begs the question, why? Exactly, you know, this is a pretty old card. People were trying to make jank with it last year, so what's changed to get people hype about Revel? Well, actually, it's a pretty easy question to answer, because Ravnica Allegiance just gave us 2 brand new pieces that actually form a pretty dumb combo with this thing that'll give you free wins some of the time. Now, it all starts with Smothering Tithe. Brand new card out of Ravnica Allegiance. Basically, whenever your opponent draws, they got to pay mana, or else you get treasure. Now, I'm not going to pretend like this is the best card in the world outside of Commander, where it is a good card. A great card in that format. But in Standard, it looks like it really doesn't do much of anything. But this thing can provide you with some incidental value over the course of a game in the form of a few treasures that your opponent would rather not pay for. You know, right now, people are playing a lot of different stuff, from Curious Obsession to Opt to Charter Course, all those cards in the same really serious deck right now. Plus, there's like Crackling Drake, Hydroid Crisis, Midnight Reaper. There's a ton of stuff that draws cards in like every Magic deck right now at the top tables. So this will give you a fair amount of treasures sometimes, even if you're not even trying to combo off. There's other stuff people are playing right now that this taxes too. I didn't just name it all. There's like Kinister's Insight. This is pretty decent up against, and even Teferi. You know, an interesting way to think about this card versus Teferi is that if they pay for you to not get the treasure, they effectively don't get to untap 2 lands, in a way. So this lines up kind of interestingly with some of the stuff that people are playing in the format, but mostly we're playing it for combo potential. But what makes this combo really wombo is Emergency Powers. This is the other brand new card out of Allegiances that makes this deck actually worth taking a look at again, you know? We can kind of force our opponent to draw 7 cards at their end step, and then just untap and win off of Revel if we've got all of our pieces in place. I mean, we're basically forcing our opponent to pay 14 mana if they don't want us to get any treasure, and we're kind of betting on them not being able to do that. Plus, Emergency Powers can come down a little bit earlier in this deck. I know it costs 7 mana, but we're making some treasure, obviously, so it shouldn't be too hard to cast this thing. Now in this deck, I'm backing up Emergency Powers with a single copy of Induced Amnesia because I'm a Spice Lord. And honestly, if I was a little bit more brave, I'd probably play more copies of this. It can benefit us in a number of ways. Now, sometimes this is just another copy of Emergency Powers. You know, we can force our opponent to draw 4, 5, 6 cards and get a bunch of treasures when next time we untap with Revel in play. But we can use this on ourselves sometimes too. Note that we're playing like 4 copies of Revel and Riches, 4 copies of Smothering Tithes, and redundant copies of Tithe on the battlefield. That's pretty good some of the time, but for the most part, you really only need 1 of each of these combo pieces to win the game, and we're playing like 4 of each of them, so redundant copies sitting in your hand isn't always the best thing, and we can kind of cash those in with Induced Amnesia to help us find any combo pieces we haven't found yet. But if we're going to find all this treasure, it helps to have a map. I'm going to play all 4 copies of this. This is basically part of the shell. You want a full playset of this because there's lots of reasons to play it. This basically ensures that at some point in the game, you'll get a burst in your treasure production so you can win off of riches more easily. It's worth noting this gives you 3 treasures. And if you hit Emergency Powers in just the right way when your opponent's tapped out, that'll give you 7 treasures. So 7 plus 3, you've won the game off of riches. Or, conversely, once it is flipped over, you could use this to help you draw into any combo pieces you don't have yet. So, there's just no good reason not to play the full complement of these. Now, that's kind of the basic shell of the deck right there, as far as I'm concerned. From here, there's a couple of directions you can branch off into. One of them involves playing a bunch of creatures. You know, you crack out your Direfleet Hoarder, your Gleaming Barrier, your Sailor of Means, sometimes even your Pitiless Plunderer for this deck, and I have seen multiple people, including some of my patrons, trying to make Teysa work with this strategy. This is a little bit more budget, but I don't think it's the best way to make the deck. That said, I will give you, in the description below, a link to the more budget, more creature-based version of this deck, along with the deck that I'm going to present to you today. Now, as far as what I have to say about the more creature-oriented version of this deck, yeah, it may be way more budget, but it also forces us to play way too many mediocre cards. I mean, we're already making a lot of deck-building concessions for bad cards. Revel and Riches, Smothering Tide, these are not the best cards in Standard, and I don't want to fill our remaining slots with cards that are also not very good cards in Standard. I think the best way to take this deck from here is to take advantage of the clause on Revel that allows for extra treasures when our opponent's creatures die, and just try to make this a more controlling deck. That said, if we're starting down that path, it all starts with Kaya's Wrath. We've got to play all 4 of this card. We need a sweeper, period, in this deck, I feel like, if we're going to actually get to the point of the game where we can pop this combo off. It is really nice to be able to reset the board some of the time. Not only that, but obviously a sweeper like this can result in like 3 or 4 treasures all at the same time with Revel and Riches. So again, sweepers are really important to this plan. I'm going to play at least the 4 copies of Wrath in the main. As far as the other removal pieces that I'm playing in the deck, we'll use Moment of Craving and Cast Down in the 2-drop slot, and then Mortify in the 3. Obviously, Mortify's ability to take out enchantments is important versus a variety of different enchantments that people are playing right now, so we've got that going for us, but Mortify and Cast Down also allow us to take out really, really big creatures, which is important in the deck, but Moment of Craving, sweet right now too, because it's going to take out almost every creature in a lot of these aggro decks, and help out our life total a little bit too. But we're not quite done on defense, because I'm also playing 3 copies of Thought Erasure, just as kind of a catch-all. I want to get those Crises out of their hand as quickly as possible. And aside from that, there's also a pretty serious mono-blue tempo matchup we're going to have to be worried about. You're just not having it, baby. I wanted her to be on camera. She might be back. But I want to let her be her own person. She can go off and do whatever she's going to do. Anyway, this is good just against a lot of stuff. It's good against mid-range, it's good against control, and it is good, especially if you're on the play, against that mono-blue tempo deck. So with so much play and just the ability to proactively get rid of stuff that would either become dominant on board against us, and we don't want that, or would stop our combo, like control decks and their counter spells and such, then this is just a really valuable piece to have. We're also playing 2 copies of Negate in the main deck here. I think it's actually the kind of format where we can get away with doing that right now. We want to shut down decks with counterspells. We want to counterspell counterspells. Not only so that we can keep them off of their plan, decks like, again, Mono Blue Aggro, where we can counter things like Curious Obsession, and that is an important play for this deck to have. And it just counters counterspells. It counters Wizard's Retort out of that deck, another important play to have. But it also counters the counterspells in actual dedicated, like, Esper control decks that'll keep us off of our combo otherwise. It's really, really important to have this card right now, and I'll play it in the main deck. But here's where things get slightly spicier and a little slightly expensive, but we're already spending all the money on Treasure Map and lands, and like for some reason Smothering Ties is over $4 now a piece. I don't know why. It's like Revel and Riches is $250. Like, this deck is too expensive already, so I don't feel too bad playing a couple of copies of Karn in here, because it does everything. It does everything, right? Like, not only do we need to draw cards in this deck, I mean, we're effectively a combo deck, right? So we got to draw some cards. But Karn is also another win condition for us. If we get like 3-4 treasures out, suddenly Karn is making really big tokens. That's important. But I'm going to finish the main deck off with easily the spiciest inclusion in the sauce, and that is the one of Vraska Relic Seeker. It turns out Vraska is a great alternate win condition, and even if she doesn't win you the game, she'll at least bust a creature or 2, get you a treasure or 2, and even help develop your board at the same time. So I just can't think of a good reason not to play a copy of Vraska. Now here are your lands. We're playing 25 of them. There's 17 black sources, 16 white sources, and then 14 blue sources. Some of the only blue cards in the entire deck are like Induce Amnesia, Emergency Powers, and Negate. So we're not really playing that much blue, but especially once we sideboard, we'll have a few more blue cards. So I want to make sure we have plenty of sources to actually get those blue cards when we need them and not have to have treasure to play them. So it's one reason why so many blue sources, but as far as 17 black, 16 white, that's the majority of the deck, and we want to make sure that we can actually cast Kaya's Wrath on turn 4 on time. We need 16 sources of each color to consistently do that. Here's the sideboard right here, and there is some spice in here, but Most of this is fairly self-explanatory. Duress will come in against both Mono Blue and Esper, or pretty much any deck that's looking to counter your spells or win off of non-creatures, like, say, Temur Reclamation. Put this in against them every game, too. We'll also finish off the playset of Negate by playing 2 Negate in the sideboard. Self-explanatory again. Anything that's looking to counter your spells, you want to counter those counter spells, so Negate comes in. Disdainful Stroke is a fairly flexible slot in this board, but I'm kind of scared of big stuff coming down in the mid to late game and just ruining our day, having no hope of racing with it or whatever, and really our plan just looking rinky-dink next to some of the most important 4 and 5 drops in Standard. So Disdainful Stroke should come in a fair amount of matchups, especially against mid-range and control decks. As far as Thought Erasure, again, self-explanatory. Just take this as a duress, put it in the 4th copy against control decks and mono blue aggro decks. This is where it starts to get a little bit spicier, though. Ritual of Soot will be sweepers 5 and 6 against dedicated aggro decks, including mono blue. Argyle's Bloodfast will come in pretty much specifically against control, but I want more help to draw cards and get our combo pieces in that matchup. This is a great way of doing it. But this is where things get spicy. The last 2 cards on the board are Profane Procession and Kaya. Now, Kaya first. This was on camera, making a big difference in the finals at the Mythic Championship. You can see why I have dumped on Kaya a good amount in the past, both on the channel and on Twitter, and I'm not going to take back all of those words. I think she's only good in very specific situations, but up against Mono Blue is definitely one of those situations. This exiles almost all of the important creatures in that deck. There are 11 1-drops in that deck in a lot of different builds. So this will take out pretty much anything that they put a Curious Obsession on, and that is very, very important. And it'll also keep them off of turning over Search for Escanto or adapting a Terramander for, very cheap. So actually a fair amount of reasons to play Kaya right now. If you could believe it, we're in the exact format for it. So Kaya is not a bad sideboard slot. It's definitely not a wasted sideboard slot, because in that one matchup, Kaya is ridiculously good. One thing, before I move on actually from Kaya, I know I'm spending a lot of time on the board here, but just one thing I want to say about Kaya is that it's very hard to actually generate real advantage against Mono Blue if you're just doing 1-for-1 interactions. You need something that actually can generate card advantage. This is a great way of doing that, because you'll kill their most important creatures and still be able to continue doing that and getting value out of Kaya as the game goes on. So you're not necessarily 2 or 3 for winning them with a Kaya, but you are still getting more value than just a 1-for-1, and that is very important against the Mono Blue deck. The same thing could be said about Profane Procession, though. This isn't just for Mono Blue. It's also for pretty much any mid-range matchup, because this card has a wide variety of options right now that it can be good against. It's good against decks that, play Wild Growth Walker and the Explore package, Hydroid Krasis and stuff like that. Yeah, you can't replay the Krasis. That kind of sucks, but at least they can't have it. Once you stick this card against some decks, it is just going to take the game over and then eventually let you play stuff, It's decent against decks that want to play things in the early game, aggro decks. Like white aggro, you stick this against them, it's actually really good. Even mono blue aggro. Keep bringing that deck up, but after the Mythic Championship, that deck's probably going to be everywhere. So I think it's important to game plan against it. And if you actually stick a turn 3 Profane Procession, there are not a lot of cards in that deck that can beat it. Well, let's get to the power. A final score of 62, which is not the best score, obviously, but this deck is memekin. If you really wanted to win off of a control strategy in these colors, you would just play, Search for Escanta and Teferi and stuff. You wouldn't be doing this stupid, janky, memey thing and trying to win off of a treasure combo. This is purely for people who enjoy trying to do stupid stuff. Which it turns out is a lot of people. And actually, if you are going to do this stupid idea, I think this is the best way to execute it. Again, the creature plan is a lot more budget, but you'll have a lot more success if you just keep the board clear and get to the point in the game where you can actually do this. That said, even though the deck does do pretty poorly in some categories, you see that for yourself. It's right there on your screen. It does do pretty well in others, we're pretty resilient, because if we actually pull the combo off, we pretty much win on the spot, and we've got some sweepers to help us get there, some removal to help us get there, even some card draw like Karn to help us make sure that we get the pieces in place. Plus, plenty of redundant ways to make treasure, It leads to a lot of synergy in the deck, and even though we're not super versatile, we do have a degree of versatility because of our removal package, plus a couple of counter spells in the main deck too, so this deck does have some things going for it, but again, again, if you want to just play serious Magic, just build Esper Control in these colors, because the deck is not actually that far away from Esper Control. We're just trying to dedicate a bunch of slots to a wonky combo. So, again, if you want to comment like, oh, this deck isn't very good, yeah, I know. You could just play Esper if you want to play a really good deck, but at the same time, people want to pull off stupid, crazy stuff and feel really good about it, and I think this is the best way to build this deck if that's what you're trying to do. If you do like doing stupid stuff, you want to try this deck out, I don't blame you. Just click the first link in the description and go over to TasteIJPlayer.com. They sponsor my content, and they're good folks over there. They're where you're going to get this deck for the cheapest. So not only will I link you, like I said earlier, to this build, first link in the description. Second link in the description is going to be to the more budget, more creature-focused version of this deck. So kind of a 2-for-1 double deck techie thing. Go check out both versions of the deck. Decide for yourself which one you'd rather play and pick up something. Aside from that, just on your way out, if you would please, hit the lights and click the like button. That would really help me out. Puts me in more recommended feeds. More people see the content. We all win, especially the channel. That really helps. Make sure you click the like button. Subscribe. Hit the bell for the notifications. These are all good ideas. Fancy, yes, but don't take too much time, honestly. And you could also click a link in the description to take you over to my Patreon page where you can pledge just $1 a month. That's all I ask. $1 every 30 days, and you can vote on what decks you want to see next. I'll let you know what decks we're doing 24 hours in advance and stuff. Pretty good value for $1, so hit the link in the description, go over to Patreon, check out all the different rewards and stuff. But aside from that, pretty sure I'm done for this one. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Make sure you spread love and be kind to each other. Yeah, I'm feeling rich, and I'm finally about to cash out. Smothered and covered like I'm some hash browns. Glass clown, stash crowns till I pass out. Bass, trout, lobster on my plate, milking the cash cow. Stacks tall as shack, protect your neck and watch your back. I'm counting checks and cracking packs, collecting decks and pumping gas.